from transitioning from something that's purely aesthetic to something that becomes experiential. So today, if you see landscape architecture in India, a lot of good landscape design is driven by the hardscape design. So you have very nice grids, you have got lines that flow, interact, you create the geometry, you create the grids, you have a palette of hardscape materials, you have granites and you've got slates and quartzites and whatever. And then you have some water features and something, but you are creating the garden experience to an extent by use of architectural design and landscape, architectural design and hardscape. Yeah, it's the hardscape palette, how you have your seating and lighting and all this. This is what today in India drives architectural design. What I am here to talk about is, can we look away from this and get the softscape to create the experience? And that is why I think this session will be of interest to youngsters like you, because architects get very frustrated when it comes to the execution of landscape, because ultimately they have to depend on that vendor, that contractor who plants. Yeah? And most of the time you have something in mind, but that contractor will say, this is only, sir, this is all that will grow here. And you say, okay, I will make do. Yeah? But it's always a challenge. Yeah. So what I am trying to convey to you here is that there is a rich repository that we can dip into, especially blessed with the climate of Bangalore. There is so much that architects here can do that can dramatically change the value of your garden. Yeah? So if the next time you have a client who says, I want something different in my landscape, think about making a sensory garden for him. Yeah? Let's go to the next slide. So of course, all of us know what the 5 senses are, but what is interesting is, in today's landscape, what percentage of that softscape drives these 5 senses? And if you look at a sort of a very rough distribution, you will find that 90% of the softscape is visual. So it's the same alamanda and galpimias, and you got your acalifers and eranthemums. It's the same palette. It's just, something that looks pretty and something that will survive, hopefully. Because all landscapes, when they are planted, look spectacular. It's when they are 4 to 5 years old that then you really see how sustainable they are. Yeah? So 90% is driving only your visual. And as I said today, people are not satisfied with just visual. They want experience. If you look at fragrance, about 8% of the softscape caters to fragrance. Yes, we will have some jasmine. We will have a night queen. Then we will have some, what else do we have for fragrance? Yeah, whatever, we have got these common plants that are there. And then we will use that for fragrance. Yes, roses, somebody will put roses as well. Yeah. And, we hope that that is sufficient for the taking the sense of smell. Only about 1.5% of the softscape in a landscape today caters to taste. So you may have 1 or 2 plants which can titillate your palate. Yeah? And that too very, very hesitantly. It's not something that the landscape wears proudly and says, come and taste me and get an experience out of it. It's something that's tucked away, and hopefully if no insecticide has been sprayed on it, then somebody is going to put something in their mouth and say, oh wow, this tastes great. Yeah? So very little. Touch. When it comes to touch, somehow we have this thing that plants are meant to be looked at, enjoyed, photographed, but not touched. Yeah? So this is that famous board, it's a subliminal conditioning. Do not touch. That board which used to be there in all Lal Bagh, Cubbon Park and all that, do not touch. So it's deeply ingrained. So you don't touch. So only about 0.5% of the softscape palette today is dealing with touch. And hearing, softscape as a means of touching your sense of hearing is almost non-existent. Yeah? So this is what we would like to reverse, because we want all this to be a nice 20%. If you have a garden where all these get addressed, equally, then you will have a very powerful garden which your client will be excited about. Tell me today, we have developers, yeah? Every developer wants to create something new. Right from maze gardens to, water gardens to Zen Buddhist gardens and rock gardens, they want something new, yeah? So this is something that you can think about and say that, hey, nobody has done this. This is something that I can bring to the table for you, yeah? Next one. Now I have given these plants. Now all these plants are extremely hardy plants. If you grow them, there is very little you can do to kill them. They will grow because they are highly adapted plants. Most of them are highly indigenous plants, yeah? The first one is what we call the Gulganji, yeah? These are beads, and these beads are very special because they used to use that to weigh gold at some time, yeah? All the beads would have exactly the same weight. That's something very special about this plant, and it used to grow in vacant lots. Like where I grew up in Baswangudi, if I went towards Chamrajpet, in vacant lots, actually Gulganji creeper would be there. You could actually pluck this, and we used to pluck this and have games. We used to play those games with seeds, yeah? It's something that's very interesting because when the wind blows through that, it makes a rattle. It's a very interesting sound, yeah? So now you see that I am started where we had zero, yeah? And I'm trying to show how we can create a sensory experience if we look at plants like this. These are indicative. I have a huge repertoire of such plants, but I'm just giving you something that you know. The second one is Cassia Fistula, which all of you will know. It's the Amalthas in North India. And it's the one that gives these beautiful showers of, it's the Indian laburnum, yeah, the yellow laburnum, the Cassia Fistula. The people from Kerala, it's very special for them because during the festival of Vishu, all the trees will be in full flower. You get these lovely showers of yellow flowers. But the pods make a very interesting sound. They make a very interesting sound like an Indonesian wooden wind chime. It is something that gives a sensory experience for your garden. You've got the Philostachys, which is the sort of a hedge bamboo. It's not one of those very big bamboos, but it's a wonderful bamboo. And in fact, the two pictures that I started the presentation with, both of them are sensory gardens. And most of the plants I'm discussing were used there. So it's very interesting because all of us know the sound of wind when it flows through bamboo, right? We know that, yeah. Okay, that's something that. But Melaleuca is a plant that looks like a spruce, like a pine, yeah. But it's one of the hardiest plants. It's a plant which will even grow in very saline environments, yeah. And it's a very hardy plant, but it's got these nice feathery, leaves, and it's got the lovely lemon yellow color to it. But what's very interesting is it whistles. And I will show you what that experience will sound like, yeah? And then you've got this acacia, and you would wonder why. This plant is very similar to the Calliandra. Calliandra is a powder puff plant, which is very similar to the Callistemon, which is the bottle brush. But it's very similar to powder puff, yeah. But it's a native, yeah. It's a native species. Bannerghatta forest, if you go, you'll find plenty of these, yeah, growing. But there's something very interesting. These pods will burst, and when they burst with a fierce crackle. So if you're sitting in the garden and you have one of these plants which are fruiting, It's a very interesting, it's a very engaging experience. I mean, I've seen people, especially children, sit with intent, waiting for that next explosion to happen. It's very, very interesting. If we can play the next slide, I have a little video that I've sort of put together, and this shows various sensory sounds that one can experience. You can play that. See that? The bamboo. It's the melaleuca that I was talking about. This is the Cassia Fistula. So that would be a very sort of an introduction to what sound can do in a sensory garden. So when you use plants like those that I'd said, it extends the interaction between the user and the garden through the softscape. Yeah? Now we come to textures. Yeah? Now textures are very, very important, especially when you have a garden that is maintained using the principles of natural farming, not chemical pesticides and chemical fertilizers. But if you're doing it the chemical-free, sustainable way, then these are the plants which you can happily use for people to interact. So we don't have that do not touch. Yeah? Please touch, please enjoy, please interact. The first one is the aloe vera, which quite a few of you are familiar. I mean, most of you would know. But the beauty about this is a plant you can touch, you can break the leaf, you can squeeze the sap, put it on your skin. It does wonders to your skin, trust me on that. And it is a plant that you can interact. It's a very, very hardy plant. Even if you don't water it for weeks on end, it will still survive. In fact, all the plants that I'm showing you here, you will have to try very hard to kill them. They are that hardy. Yeah? The Stachys Byzantia, that is what we call the lamb's ear. It's one of those very furry kind of plants. A wonderful ground cover as well. Yeah? It's nice in planters to have this where your hand is at ready reach. So approximately around 600, 750 height if you have a planter somewhere in your landscape and you plant this, trust me, people will come and touch it. And they will remember that experience. They will remember because it's such a wonderful thing. It's like velvet, yeah? And you touch it and it's a very beautiful feeling. And that is a sensory interaction. Penicetin, everybody knows. Yeah, it's vastly used. But again, it's an interactive plant because children especially love to put their hands and pull those seeds. And it's a good thing because after that they'll throw the seeds will get dispersed, they will grow somewhere else, right? It's again a way of interacting. Yeah. Now this one, Plantago is a wonderful plant. I don't know how many of you youngsters know something called a crepe paper. You know, in our days, we used to have something called crepe paper with which we used to make a lot of flowers and things like that. So it's a color paper, but it's got a very crepey feeling to it. The leaves are like that. They are like crepe paper to touch. Yeah, and Plantago is a very interesting plant because this is the plant that gives isabgol. Yeah, isabgol is one of the things which elderly people use, to help their digestion. Yeah, it adds roughage. It's a very healthy product. Yeah, so if you are suffering from, what they call the lazy bowel syndrome, then Plantago is the plant from which that isabgol is produced. So it's a plant that, if you have that plant, you feel like, trying to fold the leaf, trying to feel the leaf. It's a very hardy plant, extremely hardy plant. Bottle brushes we know, but it's a great plant again for people to interact because just holding that flower in your hand, it's a very nice feeling. And that is a sensory experience of touch. Zoysia Grass, again, many of us in Bangalore use this in our landscapes, but it's an excellent place for children to just roll around. Yeah, instead of giving them sand pits, this is a great thing to give them because they love it. It's got that nice, spongy, slightly pokey texture to it, which is wonderful. Yeah, so you have a sensory experience. And then in landscapes, sensory landscapes, I always insist that have one planter somewhere where you have this touch-me-not. Yeah, it's a weed actually. It grows wild. Yeah, but it's an extraordinary plant to get people to interact. Forget children, adults will spend a lot of time touching one, watching it close, touching one, watching it close. So every time you touch that leaf, it shuts. Yeah, everybody knows this plant, but when you make it a part of a sensory garden, then it becomes an experience. Yeah, and that's what we are here to sell, the experience. Next one. Yeah, so now we come to the edible plants. Yeah, and most of the plants that you see here, not most, all of them are very native to this region of South Karnataka. Yeah, they grow profusely anywhere, and like I said, every one of these plants you'll have to try very hard to kill them. Yeah, first one is your common onion. You will be surprised how delighted people will be when you plant onion in the midst of a landscape. It looks beautiful, and even after 4 weeks of growth, people can nip and put it in their mouth, and they'll do it. They just love that plant. Yeah, it's a great plant to have. Bacopa Muneri is our Brahmi. It's an excellent ground cover for people who are fed up with using lawns and these things, high maintenance things. You should really try Bacopa Muneri. Yeah, it is the Brahmi, and the beauty about this plant is these leaves are very special. My grandmother, who used to grow them, every time the children ran around, she'd pluck 2 leaves every day and push it down her grandchildren's throats. She'll say it'll make you intelligent. Yeah, so we all grew up eating that Bacopa Muneri. It's a very, very useful plant, greatly revered in Ayurveda, and it is an excellent, it's very good for reversing or slowing down neural degeneration. Yeah, so people who have what they call neuropathy, they will benefit hugely, and it's a beautiful plant. It's a plant that requires It'll grow in shade. That's another great advantage you have. Bacopa grows very well in shade, and a great plant to put in your mouth. It's a lovely taste to it. Beetle leaf is an excellent addition to your gardens. I've got one in my farm that just grows on a grill sort of a fence that I have, and it's perennial. It requires no care, never gets an insect. One of the best things about growing beetle is no insect will eat it. Only the thing that eats the human being. Nobody else eats the piper beetle, yeah? Excellent. And we have got some wonderful varieties like the Mysore yele. The beetle leaf from Mysore is a beautiful one. We have wonderful ones from Malnad as well. From Uppinangadi and Sakleshpur area, you've got some lovely beetle the leaves that come. Excellent stuff to grow in a garden, because you can just pluck it and eat it. And you pluck those really tender ones which are light green. It's absolutely delightful. Now, Tropium is actually a wild nasturtium, yeah? And wild nasturtiums are edible plants. Both the flower and the leaves can actually be used in salads. You can eat them. Apart from that, it's a perennial. It's a climber. It's nice to cover picket fences or, jali fences that you have. It's a great plant to have. Grows very profusely, requires very little maintenance, and a great plant. This one, Spilanthus, I like very much because this is called the toothache plant. And in Karnataka, the older generation would have at least one plant in every garden. And it was that if you had a toothache, then your grandmother will take the flower and put it in your thing and ask you to bite it. Now what happens is something very interesting. When you put this flower in your mouth, initially it's like there is a battery of current, zrrr, your tongue, it goes zrrr, something happens. And then you start profusely salivating. One of the Michelin chefs used it to make a sorbet, to cleanse your palate between courses of dinner. He used this toothache plant, the Spilanthus, yeah? And incredible. I mean, especially for an interactive sensory experience, children will just go mad, because once they've experienced it, they want to con their friends, So every time they invite their friends, the first thing they will do is to take them to the bed which has these Spilanthus, the toothache plants. We've got Centella Asiatica, which is the Jalabrahmi. Both of these are plants which will grow well in shade, marshy conditions. Jalabrahmi has larger leaves, again highly medicinal and very nice to eat. It's got a nice tangy taste, beautiful taste, wonderful thing to eat. Your sensory garden can have spearmint. Like we have pudina and things like that. Spearmint is one of the very nice plants to have. It looks very beautiful. It's very, nice green and very lush plant. And then these mentha are lovely. Spearmint, if you have not tasted, you're missing something in life, yeah? And then you've got this oxalis. This particular oxalis is the oxalis which is the red-leaved oxalis. The oxalis is this, wild clover, yeah? The clover leaf, what we call. But this one is one with a red leaf. Again, a beautiful plant. You can eat the flower, you can eat the leaves. And again, a great one to not only look fabulous, but also really engage you in the sense of taste. So we've finished two now. We've finished sound and taste, which accounted just for 5% in our conventional landscapes. Next one. So now we go to fragrance. Of course, all of us are familiar. We have the roses, and then we've got the jasmines, we've got the night queen. But I want to push the envelope a little more. Yeah? And the first one I would like to look at is the Buglia Asiatica. Great plant, grows wild in our forests. Fabulous attractant for butterflies and pollinators. Butterflies love this plant. You have one Buglia in your garden and you will be assured of hundreds of butterflies coming to your garden. Great plant with a beautiful fragrance. If you go towards Coorg and Chikmagalur, you will find this actually growing wild, along the fencing that they have, their compound fencing and things like that. You will find these Buglias growing very well, but does very well in Bangalore. Buglias are plants. We use the ornamental varieties, but use this one. This is really fantastic. Yeah. Now this one is the Hydrium, and again a great plant because it's got excellent fragrance. Again, a very hardy plant, very hardy plant. Yeah. So great plant, very easy, and the beauty is that this flowers almost about 10 months a year. So the fragrance will be there all the time. Yeah. This is the coleus, which we call the Dodapatra. Yeah. Now the thing is that it has the fragrance of aniseed. Yeah. Ajwain. Yeah. Ajwain. And every time the leaf gets damaged or broken, the whole area will be smelling of ajwain. It's a very beautiful plant. Yeah. Again, extremely hardy. We've got the Bergmansia, which people call Datura, but it's not a Datura. It's actually a Bergmansia. And of course, this is now common. If you go to the hills now in Coorg and Chikmagalur, it's all over the place. But it's a great plant and beautiful fragrance, fragrance that is somewhere between lemon, ginger, that sort of beautiful fragrance it's got here. Now, this was the old 4 o'clock plant, Bangalore used to be full of it, Any empty plot, you would find this 4 o'clock plant, which is one of those few plants which grow and flower in shade. And every evening at 4 o'clock, the flowers will open. That's why it's called the 4 o'clock plant. But the berries, these black berries, are very nice. They are edible, and the flowers have a very distinct fragrance. Unfortunately today, you don't find this plant so common. But it's a great addition to your landscapes, especially when we are doing podiums and terraces, and we always have that patch which doesn't get sun. It's a great plant to put because it's divine. The place is just divine. It belongs to the same family as the our Sitafal and all that, belongs to that same family, but it is really a fabulous plant. Sometimes in Bangalore, it doesn't become so yellow, it stays green. The petals will stay green, but the fragrance is just outstanding. The dwarf pandanus is something that I love because when it flowers, it's another experience. Again, another perfume is extracted from this, pandanus. Of course, this is my all-time favorite again, the Parijata. We still have this in gardens, but not as much as I would like to see in commercial landscapes or in, the new designer landscapes. I don't see much of this because they think it's too lanky. No, it's not. I mean, it's a very nice plant, and early morning when you walk, all the flowers will fall on the ground. So it's like somebody's laid out a carpet of this beautiful orange and white, and the fragrance is just very dramatic. So the third sense, which is the sense of smell, we have a huge palette. I've just given you a few because these are native plants, very hardy. Okay, so put these, you can almost forget about them because they don't die. Yeah, next one. Yeah, so we come to the sense of sight. Yeah, now of course we have a lot of plants which people say are beautiful. Yeah, I mean, sure, our alamanders look lovely. Our quisqualis creepers look lovely, roses look lovely, but all of these require maintenance. Yeah, and people who have done gardening or landscape architects here who are into this, you know your biggest problem is the amount of care you need to take to keep them healthy. Yeah? Because many of them don't belong to this land. Yeah? They all came in from somewhere and, you know, sort of got themselves in, you know, naturalized, but they don't belong here. What I'm showing you here are plants which you will find even today in the wild. If you go to our scrub forests, not even to the Western Ghats, even if you go to our scrub forests like Bannerghatta or Nandi Hills and things like that. Now, for example, the Asparagus Rasimosus. Yeah, it's a beautiful plant. You cannot kill this plant. Yeah, and when it is either in flower or it is fruiting, it's very dramatic, very, very dramatic. Yeah, and once in 2 years you can actually take out the roots. Yeah, you can use the roots for cooking and then, you know, put back the divided plant and it will grow again. Yeah, this is our and this plant, you know, like. It is actually, all these plants that I'm going to show you, they are our native plants. They are recorded in our literature. If you go through a text called the Vriksha Ayurveda, or you go to Charaka Samhita, all these plants are recorded there. Yeah, this is Shatavari. And Shatavari is a very important Ayurvedic medicine. Yeah, and it's used for a lot of things like rheumatism. It's used to calm your nerves. So many things, yeah? Matsyakshi is your alternanthera. Yeah, we do have some alternanthera in our landscapes, but not as much as I would like to see. Because again, it takes semi-shade very well. And if you just keep trimming it, pruning it, or like, you know, more like you mow a lawn, if you take away the tops, it's a perennial. As long as it doesn't flower and seed, it will grow as a perennial. Yeah. So it's another great plant. I love the color, I love the texture, but more than anything else, if you take these leaves and you boil them and take that juice into coconut oil, it's supposed to be one of the best hair oils that you can use in your life. In fact, in my grandmother's days, her hair oil used to be made from this. Yeah, they used to make hair oil out of this. Now the Ishvarabali, this is the Aristolochia. Aristolochia is a very dramatic plant. You have this in your garden, people will stop. Yeah, because its flowers are very, very different. And the beauty about it is right from the flowering stage to the seed pod, it holds your eye because it's attractive. Even the seed pod is like a beautiful basket. Yeah, it's like something you can put something and gift somebody. Yeah, and these are fairly large. They are not very small. And the flowers are very dramatic. They almost look like orchids. Yeah, very dramatic plants. And Ishvarabali is one of the things that they use for as a sedative. It's for people, you know, who are hyper or, you know, get very irritable, excited. So Ishvarabali is one of the ingredients in Ayurveda. And these are all listed in books that are 2,000, 4,000 years old. They are our plants. They are our heritage. And that is why I think they need to be revived in our landscapes today. You know, apart from giving you all the sensory experience, these are plants which represent us. Yeah, this is our DNA. Yeah, the clitoria, which is the blue tea. I don't know how many of you know blue tea, but if you take this flower and put it in hot water, you get this beautiful sky blue tea. And made very famous because I think all the Shah Rukh Khans and the Kardashians drank it and they said it made them look younger. So in Bombay, if you go to the Bandra Cafe, you get 400 rupees a cup of this. But this is a wild creeper. It grows wild. But it's one of the most beautiful, and it's the Aparichita. In our Ayurveda, we call this the Aparichita. It's a great plant because it's so full of antioxidants that it is considered to be contributing to anti-aging. That's why the revival of the thing. But otherwise, we've known about this plant for years together. Very easy to grow extremely hardy. It will not have one insect on it. Not one insect you will find on the clitoria, on the Aparichita. Now the Rauwolfia serpentina is actually our plant. And this was the first plant that gave, now Sarpagandha, the first plant that was used for reducing blood pressure. Yeah. So Sarpasil, the drug that you get in the market, the active ingredient is from this plant. And it's a beautiful plant. The flowers are lovely. The texture of the foliage is lovely. And plus it's got this incredible medicinal use. So why not have this in our gardens? Similarly, you've got the Daktaki, which is the Woodfordia. Again, picture doesn't do any justice to this plant. It's a beautiful Ayurvedic plant. And where do you get these plants? You will get these plants in the Ayurvedic nurseries. There's one at the Bangalore University, which is a very good place to start. But that's where you would actually find these plants, unless you went to the wild and picked them up. But you would find these in the Ayurvedic nurseries. Now, Woodfordia is a beautiful plant, yeah? It's especially when you have kidney problems, kidney-related problems, liver-related, anything to do with fatty acid indigestions, or that's a great plant to have. Now you got this one which looks like a jade plant. It's not a jade plant actually. It's actually, it's called the Mansevil in the Tamil, because it looks like the ear of a doe, a deer. A deer's ear, the animal deer. It looks like its ears. But again, a great plant. It's like aloe vera. You can't kill this plant. And it's a very hardy plant in our landscapes. It looks gorgeous. It looks beautiful. And the operculina, yeah, the operculina is called the Trivrit, yeah, the Trivrit that in our Ayurveda. Again, a very, very interesting plant because it has beautiful white flowers, yeah, very large, stunningly beautiful white flowers. It's like your morning glory, but completely white, yeah. And then it's got this the fruit or the seed, which is almost like a piece of art. Yeah, it's just so beautiful. Yeah, so again, great plants to have, which can easily replace our galpemias and our homescoldias and Hemelia petens and whatever else that we have. Durantas and whatever that we grow. We have a whole range. These are our plants. The next one. I'll just go through a few more. I'm just pushing the envelope for you because these are all our plants, yeah? The Adathoda, the Justicia Adathoda, also called Adathoda vasica. This is called the Vasaka in our text. These are all plants which are our plants. They are indigenous plants, yeah? Now, if you look at this, each flower looks like a lion which is laughing. It's got the tongue coming out and it's got this huge smiley face, and it's known. It's a wonderful plant, huge properties. And one of the greatest things about Adathoda is you can plant it where maintenance and protection is very difficult. Adathoda actually comes from the word Adu Todade Gida. That means even a cow or a goat will not touch this plant. That's how the name Adathoda actually comes. It comes from Adu Todada Gida. Yeah? Now, it is a great plant. So when you have public spaces where you can't fence off, where you want to put something that looks nice, which is a part of your DNA, your culture, it's a great plant to have. Again, very hardy and highly medicinal. The Gloriosa, now this one, the Agni Sakshi. I mean, you can see why the name, it has Agni Sakshi, right? Because it looks like fire, yeah? This creeper, Gloriosa superba, is another great addition to our gardens. And it's a brilliant plant to plant. It flowers twice a year, and in Bangalore at least, and absolutely incredible plant, huge medicinal benefits. The Soralia, which we call the Kushnashini. Now, Sorelia suddenly became very famous of late because some people found that this was a great cure for hair which is falling, which is very wiry, dry, or even baldness. Yeah. So suddenly this, but we knew Kushtanashini. Kushta actually refers to hair. Yeah, and in our Ayurveda and Charaka Samhita, this plant is actually said that it gives you lustrous hair. We knew this 5,000 years ago. But this recent interest in this plant has happened, I'm talking about a couple of years ago. Suddenly people start getting very excited about this plant. They say it's a wonder plant for hair and things like that. Now Krishna Kamal, which is the Passiflora racemosa, brilliant plant. This is one of those great plants, a creeper which you can grow on trellises and things like that. We talk about these vertical gardens which are coming up in all places. Even if you have a 10 feet by 10 feet garden, one wall will be this vertical. When you put these pots, my thing is try to think out of the box. Plants like this is a plant which will even take semi-shade. And when it flowers, and it flowers profusely, it is dramatic. It's really dramatic. It belongs to the passion fruit family, but it's not the blue one. It's the red one, which is called the Krishna Kamal. And we've got the Sarpasil, the Hemidesmus. This is a ground cover. You'll find this ground cover even now in the wild. Yeah, if you just go like where I play golf, you will find it growing on the ground. Yeah, but it's a great landscape plant. It's a great plant for landscaping because its leaves are so dramatic, its flowers are so dramatic, and plus it has got a very, very important drug, a medicine that comes out of it. The wild Solanum, again, great plant to have. When you have some area where back of the house, you want to cover up something, you want something that's hardy but looks pretty, doesn't require any maintenance, that's your plant. It's got this beautiful blue flowers, and then it's got these berries which go from green to red and black. And the flowers, the leaves are very interesting. Nice height it grows to, and will require zero care. Yeah, zero care. That's the beauty of this one. Leucas. This plant is not the seasonal, it's a perennial leucas, and Drona Pushpi. It's called the Drona Pushpi, and it's again a great plant for our landscapes. Yeah, it looks like nothing you've seen. It's got fragrance to it. It's got a lot of value. The leaves can be chewed, especially if you've got. It's got these, what do you call this, hypoglycemic property. If you're diabetic, then it's a great plant for you. Costus has started making appearance now in gardens. I'm very happy about that, but I still thought I'd bring this because this is Kemuka. And Kemuka is again another plant which controls blood sugar. Yeah. Now, what I mean by this is these are all plants which have been recorded in our texts at least 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years ago. Vriksha Ayurveda dates back to Krishi Parasara, and that is like 5,000 years. Yeah. Now, these are listed there. They have the names were given there. And Charaka Samhita has gone into great descriptors of exactly what the plant is, what is its dosha, what does it do for you, how to grow it, all things recorded, We as landscape architects, we need to redefine what we use in our gardens. Yeah? When we have such wonderful palettes available to us, why are we really killing ourselves growing things that were never meant to grow here? Yeah, we are always struggling, put bavestine, put chlorpyrifos, and then you put phorate and this and that. I mean, why are you killing yourself? These plants don't die, and they're so beautiful. And more than that, they represent us. They represent our culture. So one more slide. Now, both these are sensory gardens. Most of the plants that I've described here come from here, are there, in this design. And you can see, they're pretty. One is a terrace and one is a podium design. And it looks pretty, but they are our plants, and they will touch all your 5 senses. Yeah. So with that, I close my presentation. I hope you all enjoyed it. So if anyone wants, yeah, thank you. So the point of this presentation was, if anyone wants, a client wants for you to do something different, propose this. I will mentor you how to do it, but get some of these going. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, but no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Thank you. Okay, why don't you start?
I think it should be. Hello. Sure. Okay, I'm Vijay and Annapati. I'm just here to ask a few questions and trigger a discussion. It's kind of gently mind-blowing what you've spoken, so much passion. I know in my experience, I've spoken to many people about sensory gardens, but not in a way that seems to draw you in and convince you that why we're not doing this everywhere. So, to ask you a first question, there was actually in Bangalore, there was a certain period of time when public landscape, especially in our streets and our gardens and parks, I think was influenced deeply by another interesting, I think, horticulturist rather, Mr. Neginal, if you know, right? Right. So there the choice was to, do sometimes decorative landscape. So one street would become all pink, and another street would become all green. And I'm so bad at these names. I'm sorry very much. I just can't, remember these names. But at the same time, it started giving character. So there's a visual landscape, right? So the gardens, of course, we have Lal Bagh. There is a deep, interesting difference from, say, Cubbon Park, which Lal Bagh is a botanical garden. So we have all these different interesting traditions, recent traditions, not the deep traditions that you're talking about. So what, how would you now change our approach to, I know you still talk about sensory gardens, but say, suppose you had an opportunity to repopulate and slowly redefine what is grown in Cubbon Park. First, would that be right, given that the fact that it was designed as a particular kind of landscape? Second, because people want to go there and experience the space, it makes sense to make it sensory. But would you then bring, what kind of a transformation would you bring to a place like Cubbon Park? Just as a hypothetical question. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. That would be normal, yes. All right. So is the question okay? I mean,
yeah. Cubbon Park is something that I would shudder to touch, to be honest. Because
why do you say that? I mean, first.
I would have to just, say why. Because you see what happens with the colonial landscapes anywhere in India. Okay. The colonial landscapes were done with a certain philosophy. There was an underlying philosophy, there was an underlying principles that were used, and they were meant to cater to a certain functionality and purpose, right? Now, Cubbon Park is one such garden. The controversial one that I'm working on is the Central Vista, and if you looked at Lutyens, there was nothing wrong with what Lutyens had envisaged. And today, what we are trying to do is to sort of really revive that vision which he had. Now, what happens after we took over these gardens post-independence, we didn't really understand what they wanted, what their vision was, what their principles was. Lutyens was a Freemason. And he has so much of hidden sacred geometry in his garden. It's fascinating, how much of sacred geometry there is in his gardens. We don't understand all this. But now what we've done is we have gone merrily, adapted it, planted it. Every one Mahotsav, X number of trees have to be planted. You just plant them. Therefore, the dilution of the design intent, the original design intent has been diluted so much. Because every person who comes to power likes to leave a little legacy. So who's really going to? You've got this vast garden.
Wasn't it sort of visual landscape of power? Yes. It's very different from what you're talking about.
Exactly. So this is what I'm saying. It was to shock and awe. The central vista, the Rajpath, was actually the king's way. It was anybody who was even approaching the viceroy's residence would be in shock and awe at the enormity of that scale of landscape.
Intimidation.
Intimidation, basically. Now we are talking about a democracy. Yeah? We are talking about a democratic country where that, is not going to work in its original form. But nobody really knew how to adapt it in a sensitive way. Cubbon Park is a similar scenario. Yeah? So if one really wants to look at Cubbon Park as a democratic space of the 21st century, we need to go back to the roots. We need to understand where did they start from, and then how do we adapt it sensitively so that we retain what was good, we add and adapt what is required. So I wouldn't clearly say that I would bring the sensory garden. Having said that, there are those bamboo groves in Cubbon Park. And it's one of the places where a lot of people have gone and had a sensory experience of just sitting under and watching those, hearing those stems rub against each other.
Absolutely.
So it is there. But when you look at something as vast as Cubbon Park, it requires much deeper understanding. We wouldn't just take something from here and put it there.
So the other pride of Bangalore, I understand what you're saying. I think if anyone else has something to add to this, you could just let me know. But the other pride of Bangalore is Lal Bagh, right? Well, it's a completely different animal to this. At least, I hope most of you know that Lal Bagh is a botanical garden, and it had a life of its before, like say Tipu Sultan Hyder Ali, and there was a sort of a different gardening history and heritage there. So, what is your understanding become of Lal Bagh? Has it been colonized in some manner, different from what the intent was again? And because we're all here in Bangalore, what would you do about Lal Bagh on the other hand?
Firstly, let's see exactly Lal Bagh in its historic perspective. It was originally developed with the Arabesque, the Muslim design. So the very neat charbagh kind of designs that you have, very geometric use of intersecting lines, use of water. All these things originally was there from Hyder Ali's time. That was the thing. Then when the British came, they tried to then adapt it to a colonial. That's when the bandstand and all these things started coming up. So it was some sort of a vague confluence even at that time, but the intent of Lal Bagh was a botanical garden. So I think that is one of its saving, I would say, not even saving, I would say it's a USP even today. I mean, I still go to Lal Bagh because there are some wonderful plants, like Ficus krishnae. There is this beautiful plant called Ficus krishnae, and it's got this lovely leaf, which if you pour water from one end, it drips at the other end. It is said in the Puranas that when Krishna was fed as a baby, the milk was actually poured on that leaf and then it was put. That's why the Ficus krishnae, the name comes. Very endangered plant. But it's a veritable warehouse of such endangered plants. So I think keeping Lal Bagh and even reinforcing Lal Bagh as a botanical garden would still be the right direction that Bangalore should look at. Yeah, rather than trying to make it a Mickey Mouse space of, make it, okay, it is a public space, let the public interact, but keep that prime vision of a botanical garden. Then we have a legacy that we can leave behind.
There's a wonderful book, Suresh Jairam has written, not along with others, beautiful drawings, amazing book. I think everybody should take a look at this book. The next question is, what about the birds and the bees, and where do they participate in your sensory garden? Because I think you kept it sort of purist, and it comes from the plants, all the senses. What happens to the birds and the bees?
So birds, absolutely. I mean, first of all, the bees, the pollinators. Many of these plants which I showed here, they are wonderful pollinators. They are wonderful for pollinators. I'm not just talking for bees and birds, but even flying foxes, for example. Flying foxes are wonderful pollinators. Very few of us know that flying foxes pollinate. Yeah. So they are all very, very good for that. And a lot of the fruit from many of the plants that I've showed you, they are birds' delight. Birds thrive on that. Like, for example, the Asparagus Rasimosus that I spoke about. Those red berries actually wave out to the birds. Come and pick me, because that's how the dispersal takes place. The seed will come out untouched from the gut of the bird. But the bird loves it, loves the color, and it comes and picks it, eats it, and then deposits it somewhere else. So a lot of these plants which are indigenous are also very, very compatible with the local fauna. The bird fauna, they are compatible. In fact, many birds we have lost because they don't have green parrots, for example. Now, green parrot is a dwindling population today because it fed on a particular fig, and today that particular fig, which comes from the Ficus virens, which we call the pilkans, which is the pilkans tree, is not really seen
till about 5 to 10 years ago. Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Now they're disappearing.
But as a result of that, you see these green parrots, the green neck parrots. They're disappearing.
COVID has helped revive some of it.
Absolutely.
And the one plus point that we have is that the birds have made a comeback to the city. Okay.
The sparrows. I am so thrilled.
And my little garden is seeing such strange new birds, and again I'm sort of name blind to all that. I can't call what bird would.
Now that's a good point of view.
That's also there.
We've got more time to stand and stare.
So as an extension to this, and I'm reading a book by Cassia. It's a very fat book. I thought I can't finish it, but it's a very engrossing book. It's called Funeral Nights, and Kin Pham. I can't remember the whole name. I'm very sorry, but brilliant book. It talks about the composite experience that people in the forest have of the lay of the land, the flora and the fauna, and there's sort of a completely embeddedness, the culture, whatever they do. So this story is a very interesting story. It's about the last disappearing funeral that this tribe may do. They would keep the corpse for months because then eventually they'd want to throw a big banquet. And so these people go to visit it. In the process, they discover their own culture and the relationship between nature, land, and themselves. Right? So I'm thinking, what is the learning that you have in all this that you've shared? Of course, you're a scientist, you have education here, education abroad. What is the learning process from people who are embedded in the forests and nature? Yeah. What have you learned from them?
So one of the things that I'm blessed is that I actually work with a lot of tribal populations, and the one that I am recently working largely with the Ministry of Tribal Affairs is in the area of Aurangabad, the Ellora Janta area. We are working very closely with the tribals there. Now, very interesting, I am also mentoring a project which is the Indrani River waterfront in Pune. It's in the outskirts of Pune, and this is a river which is being revived. And you know the experiments that happened with the Sabarmati River. It's all concrete. It's a concrete drain, So ultimately you did something. Yeah, you created a public space, but at what cost? So this time we said that we will not have concrete, and this will be done actually with all earthen embankment with softscape and trees giving the reinforcement, not steel and concrete. So this was the general driver for this particular project. So when I started to develop the palette, the planting palette for this for this project, I was very curious because suddenly I saw a lot of lines showing fencing and compound and all. I said, what is all this for? They said, because if we plant, we have to protect it. Otherwise, the tribals and the local population will take it away or they'll damage it. And that's when we had some very interesting, I had some very, very proactive IAS people, the bureaucrat person there, the commissioner there, and he understood what I was saying. So I said, if I am going to plant there indigenous trees which have got value, which the locals can collect. They can collect the seeds, or they can collect the leaves, or they can collect the fruits, and it gives them an income. I said, we will get them to protect the tree. And therefore now this entire riverfront is being populated completely with indigenous medicinal species. Much like the shrubs for the gardens that I showed you, we have a lovely palette for the tree species. We have beautiful varieties, all ancient. 5,000 years ago, the descriptors are there in our books. So we have these trees, and the locals know these trees. They know that today they don't get any income because all the trees are gone. But they remember that these trees were giving them income. They once kept their tribes alive. So when you start dialoguing with the local population and them that we are going to bring these trees back here, you are going to be the stakeholder who's going to look after it. Then you've got a win-win situation. Then you're not, it's not like I'm cordoning off. Now this is my land and now you stay out of it because this is going to be a place where I'm going to come for walking in the morning. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I think again, going back to our roots, indigenous palette is a very, very powerful palette. It's a very exciting palette that we have in India. Landscape, softscape designers, for example, still are exploring it. There's much to be explored, and I urge each one of you to explore it. We have a very rich heritage of plants. We don't have to do this, Duranta goldiana, and Hemilia patens. We don't have to go that route.
Brilliant. Do we have more time? How are we doing on time? Yeah. So anyone else has I think there's so many questions. Yeah, great. So shall we go with you first?
If you could just introduce yourself.
Hello sir, I'm Dhruval Vyas and I'm from the company named Perennials. Many of heard that name many times in your presentation. I'm from the western part of India, Gujarat, Vadodara, and it's a layman question. I just want to know the plants which you have mentioned in your presentation. Are they growing in that land?
Oh yes, a lot of that. In fact, we have a much stronger. I am doing the Tapi riverfront again now, and even when we did the Patel statue, we used a lot of native plants there. A lot of native plants. So actually, if you ask me, I think in your area you've got a bigger choice of indigenous plants that you can use. Bangalore, the weather is very nice, but you have got the extremes of weather, so you can use actually two types of plants. Like even grasses, you can use two varieties of wild grass, one which will stay in the winter and one which will stay in the summer, and both of them grow alternately. So there's a lot of exciting experimentation you can do in Gujarat.
Thank you, and I must thank you for the detailing. Right. It's something thrills me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leena. So You know, today we have a lot of infrastructure projects. Now, let's say you drive to the airport, and it's all only visual landscaping. I don't think anybody's walking over there. And that landscaping compels you. You won't miss it. You see it. So if we were to change the plants, you know, those are all visuals to whatever you've said, do you think we could get the same effect? I mean, they're all manicured landscapes.
Yeah. So if you took, for example, Bangalore Airport, yeah? So Bangalore Airport, the initial 3 kilometers that you start to drive in from your Trumpet flyover, you're just sitting in a car and you're driving through. It's not a place where you get down, walk to enjoy the garden. So here, I would say that visual landscape is good because that's what it's meant for. The functionality is to make it, you know, look nice and very pleasant and attractive. People are not expected to get off their cars to experience the landscape there. And I don't think people down the windows to smell it, or I don't think any of that happens. So sight is sight, so 100% it is that. But what would be very interesting is now the new terminal where they are having so much of interactive spaces. One of the beautiful things that is happening there is that they are giving a lot of focus on plants with which people can interact. This is what I've heard. I'm not a part of the design team there, but from what feedback I have got, they are actively looking, because I got some mails through people who are involved asking for certain plants, Ayurvedic plants, you know, which have taste and this and that. I was very happy. I said, this is thrilling that, you know, they are even thinking about it. So I think there would be something interesting that will come out of that landscape.
But along the airport, the plants that are there, are some of them indigenous? I mean, I don't know, so I'm just asking you.
Most of them are not.
Not?
Most of them are not.
Okay.
Yeah.
But can't we create a space like that, which is strongly visual with plants that we have?
Absolutely. 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 There's no two ways about that.
Okay. Can I just ask one question? Okay.
Shahrukh here wants to ask a question, and I'm going to ask it for him. The Kurunji plant, which is in Kodi, flowers every 12 years. Can you throw some light about it as to why is it in Kodi forest or that area, and is it somewhere else? Something about it.
Yeah. So Kurunji is a plant that is indigenous to the Western Ghats. It's not just in Kodi. It is also right now, it is in flower in Coorg. It started to flower. So all along the Western Ghats, you will get the Kurunji plant. Yeah. So it is a native plant, and it requires that climate to flower. It is a plant that flowers once in 7 years, like you said. That is the cycle for the flowering of the plant. Because once that flowering happens, then the plant will drop the seeds and the mother plant dies. Then it's the new plant that comes up, and then 7 years down the line, it will flower again. That's the life cycle of the plant. Kurunji plant has refused to flower elsewhere. If you brought that plant and sowed it, for example, in Bangalore, it won't flower. It will stay as a plant, but it doesn't flower because it requires that particular climate for it to flower. Now, very interestingly, its flowering cycle has gone haywire because of climate change and our rainfall patterns. So why Kurunji should not have been in flower now? It's basically this is not the season for its flower right now. But in Coorg, it started to flower suddenly. All of this thing. In Pune, about 3 years ago, it suddenly sprouted up and started to flower. Yeah. So I think the plant is also very confused with what's happening outside. It will take some time for it to assimilate that into its cycle. But it's not a plant that you can translocate. It's not a plant that we can bring and make it flower anywhere else. So maybe we just enjoy it there in its local environment. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
My name is Sindhuja. I'm studying the first semester of landscape design at SPA Bhopal. So, unfortunately, with online classes, experiencing is something I have to do on my own. So, going to the gardens and parks around and opening up with the five senses. So, the plants themselves and the biodiversity, it's a very good experience. Only negative common denominator is the mosquitoes. So, how do we address that?
Oh, you have wonderful plants that are that repel not just mosquitoes but many of these kind of insects. Citronella, for example. Citronella is what we call the lemongrass. That's a great plant to have. We have another grass that's called the vetiver. It's one of the very vigorous grasses, very useful for erosion control. That has got very good property of keeping these kind of pests away. So we have plenty in our thing. If you go to, in fact, Nalini did that. She came to our botanical garden, our Ayurvedic garden, and that's when I first introduced her to these wonderful plants that we have. And she was fascinated because she'd never seen such a palette of plants. I would always recommend go to Ayurvedic nurseries. Yeah, there are beautiful nurseries in Bangalore. One is at the Bangalore University, like I said. The other one is near the Ayurveda College. They have a small nursery there. GKVK campus, our agriculture university, they have an Ayurvedic nursery. So start, I would suggest any landscape architect or garden designer here, make a trip to these Ayurvedic nurseries, because you will find fascinating plants which can become a part of your softscape palette. Yeah, and you will find many such plants which help us keep control populations like mosquitoes and things like that. Yeah.
Hi. Oh, sorry.
Oh, so,
Yeah.
thanks. Sorry.
Hi, so my name is Shraddha. I'm an empathy facilitator and a bio-integrated artist. So I wanted to switch the perspective from humans to plants and focus on the relationship between two plants and the relationship between plants and the microcosmos, and how we can possibly support them for the health of the plants.
Oh, wow.
So I would love some tips on it.
It's a fascinating topic, because the science that you talk about is called allelopathy. Allelopathy is how two plants interact with each other. So you will have plants which are friendly to each other and plants which are antagonistic to each other, and that actually happens because of the chemical exudates that plants produce and they keep. So it's a very interesting. Now there is a very fascinating science in our tradition, which is called Mitra Vriksha, Shatru Vriksha. Yeah, and this entire science is from Vriksha Ayurveda, which talks about what kind of plants should you plant together in your garden or in your forests or anything like that, and what kind of plants you should not put together. And there is a very beautiful story about how a banyan tree and a neem tree are antagonistic. They'll never find a banyan and a neem next to each other. Never. You can go and check it out. Never see a banyan and a neem tree. And this goes to the science of how each tree has got a ruling planet and how these planets interact to something. There is a science which explores planetary relationships, and because these two sit in antagonistic planets, these two will never grow together. The bargat and the neem will never grow together. Whereas the bargat, but with the pilkans, they will grow together. Although this is a ficus and this is a ficus, but the ruling planet is a different one. So, it's an extraordinary science, and Graha Samiti, it is called the science of the interaction between planets. It's a very fascinating science. So offline, if you connect with me, I will give you a lot of interesting information, which is at least 5,000 years old. We know about this. Yeah.
Hello, sir. This is related to her thing. The eucalyptus also supposed to be antagonistic to many vegetation around. No?
Eucalyptus was one of the biggest mistakes that the British did. I mean, eucalyptus was not a plant for our our bio regime
Now
at
it's
all.
like a pollution. We have to
It
deal with
was one of those things which was brought and thrust down on us. And eucalyptus is one of those plants where nothing will grow. If you walk under a eucalyptus, it'll be just sand. Yeah,
True.
It's like casuarina. Nothing will grow under it. Yeah, so eucalyptus, if you start planting eucalyptus, it's just going to be eucalyptus stands, nothing else. And you can see this in the Nilgiris, the Shola forests, how decimated they got because of eucalyptus plantations. Yeah.
Okay, sir. So my introduction is I'm Dr. Joyshila, I'm an ENT specialist. I'm a nature lover, so anything green goes with me. Sustainability, tree group, and organic terrace gardening, composting, all are our wide interests. She's one of my co-member. We go to schools and even educate children now these days because have found teaching adults kind of time waste, energy loss. So now catching them young and even half an hour spent with them every week is something like a treasure. It's like a treasure hunt. We've been getting rich day by day, interacting with children, and they're so full of energy and they have no resistance for our whatever we say. They know that we're doing something worth, not like just putting down like why you people are waste and adults when we interact we always have a kind of fear of getting discouraged. Sometimes we may even shut up and give it off if we are not having that strength and to pull it on. So anyway, that's the green work we are into. I wanted to know when we plan a sensory garden, if it is for the hearing perspective, are we going to club all the different hearing or even this fragrance, like a champa and a manoranjita? They all come in the same category. So are we going to distance them, or are we going to make them a club where here the particular sense is targeted?
Yeah, so that's a very nice question because you're talking about how do we design the sensory garden. So this presentation was basically to just get youngsters here aware of the soft palette available for sensory gardens. But these landscape architects are the ones who design. Now, there are many principles in sensory garden design, and one of them is called very discrete planting. So what you have is you have your design, but each sense would be addressed in a different part of the garden. So one principle says that you have a sensory garden where here this is all for your nose, this is all for your ears, this is all for then you've got diffuse sensory gardens where it's all nicely planted. You don't know really where is what, but then at every turn there is something new that's popping up, and at different seasons there is different things that's happening there. So that is basically based on how you're going to design the garden itself. I was not really addressing garden design here, but I was just saying we have such a rich palette, and you as designers should look at these softscape palettes. That is what I was doing. But your question is
if it's a limited space, maybe mix and match is
mix
better.
And match, yeah. A mix and match works in a small space. Like these pictures that you see, these are diffuse because the space is very small. Yeah. So it's a diffuse planting. So there's something to touch, there's something to taste, there's something to feel, there is something to hear, and something to look at. So everything is there,
Got it, sir. Thank you so much. And you've been an inspiration, sir.
Thank you so
totally
much.
Opened a new world, completely different world today.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Sir, I'm Lakshmi.
Yes.
You said about amidismus. That plant grows very slow. Nearly 1 year I am growing. It's very little much foliage because the Google also says it's a very slow plant. But you said it's a crop cover. It's a covering plant.
Yes.
So it's even that Dhanvantari Vana, Bangalore University, there also I found only 2 or 3 leaves.
Yes.
Maybe that shade or that moisture, I don't know.
Yeah.
I am observing that also.
Yeah. So one of the first things about this particular plant is that you should not water it. And I think we all make this mistake. We think, in fact, all the plants that I have shown, they don't require our standard 6 liters per square meter irrigation. They don't need it. Yes, they will take what the weather gives them, the nature gives them, and they're extremely. So one of the first things that you do is that you have nearly a 50% saving on your water footprint. And this particular plant, I know exactly where you, because I have worked with this plant. I know exactly what you're saying. The first thing is don't water this plant. Yeah, even if you think it's going to die, it's not going to die. But once it gets enough strength, then it will slowly start. The beauty about this is they are slow and steady plants, but they will last for years together. You know, it's not like these lawns which every 5 years you have to uproot them and relay them, and you know the hassle with the malis. I mean, this is a standard story. Yeah, yeah. Last question, anybody? Yeah. Right.
So first of all, I really loved the way you explained to us. That passion was, really good. So my question, or like just a thing, could you throw some light on, softscape bit of it, which could invoke fear and probably reduce the crime rates which is happening, at least in these urban scenario. You have compound walls, you have fences, these hardscape or like hard structures which is used, but how can we use softscape to combat at least for a certain person?
Never thought of that in sensory gardens. But it's an interesting concept that you have. Yeah, like for example, it is more. I don't really see this actually done systematically. Although I don't see why not. For example, we've got Datura stramonium. Yeah, we've got also a lot of plants which give itch when you touch them. Like we've got a lot of the creepers, especially, which belong to the poison ivy category. So we have got some native hedera species which cause a lot of itch. So I don't know, but I've never promoted this, but I don't see why not. So, maybe there is a need for something like this.
So apart from the euphorbia and cacti species and all that.
Yeah, so the thorny ones everybody knows. Yeah. Like Euphorbia splendens, for example. It's so thorny that nobody's going to go near it, right? But what if you, did it with something that you don't even know? I don't know. It's a very interesting thing you've thrown. I don't see why we can't address it.
Barrier in the median.
No.
In the median, for example, they are asking us, we're doing some projects, they want to put metal fences. Instead of that, something like this would work.
So Shahrukh says, get the pepper and use the pepper spray.
I agree with you, Shahrukh, on that. Yeah, I agree with you. Yes.
I think it's been a great conversation. Really, truly inspiring. Thank you so much. I think, Nandini, can you please?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Prabhakar. I think we've all learned a new way of looking at landscapes, and when it's something new, even adults are not bad. I think we've all learned, we've all imbibed what you've said, a new way of looking at it. On behalf of ASSOCHAM GEM, I must first thank IIID BRC for allowing us the time and the space to interact with everybody over here. We'll conclude, and we have a small memento to give. Namit, yes, Namit is very rare, we hardly see him. And since he's come today, I said, well, Namit Verma, I did first say I'd like Shahrukh to come, but then they said he won't come. So Namit, that's for Dr. Prabhakar Rao. Thank you very much. And for Vijay Nannapati. Namit, wait.
I think he's done all this.
No, I think even for Vijay. So we have to get Vijay, Namit. We don't see them very often these days. So thank you. And I think we have another session on young Turks from Bangalore who's going to talk about architecture from earth. That's on the 18th. So come again, it would be a nice session. Thank you very much. That was my vote of thanks.